Derek Wheatley, and welcome to episode 198 of the Wheatley podcast. Thank you very much for joining us wherever you are doing so. A massive thanks to Mieke, who came on last week. In my opinion, the man who wrote the Bible on grunge music. Everybody Loves Our Town is the name of the book. He was a fantastic guest. He doesn't just write about music, he writes about all sorts of things, but to get to talk about my favorite grunge bands from the 90s was a bit of a dream, and especially the fact that I love Mark's book so much. So if you haven't listened, go back and listen to it. Even if you don't like grunge, even if you kind of don't even know what grunge is, like maybe my dad, go back and have a listen, and you might start listening to Nirvana or something. You can support us on Buy Me a Coffee, link is in the description, all the rest of that. My guest this week is a farmer and co-director of the documentary Hungry Hill, Mieke Vanmechelen. All right.
You got it right.
Yeah. I don't know why I got real confident then and put a bit of something on the mech like that.
Yep, that's perfect. Very Flemish.
Very Flemish. When we will talk about our film, obviously, but about your film, but I the Dutch language there's parts in the film where there's clips from yesteryear, we'll say, and there's a man in it, predominantly in it, and he speaks in Dutch, and it's a very listenable language. There's something quite, I don't know, there's something reminding me of Cork or something melodic in it.
Yeah, you're right, and the way he speaks is very distinctive, and it's a very special dialect, and it's connected to the place, obviously, which is it's like a part of it is Belgium, part of it is Holland, and his accent reflects that. So it's a perfect mixture of the two, and it's very soft. And I haven't actually been back there in a very long time, and I would be very surprised if people still spoke like that there now. So it is a bit reminiscent of Irish, I think.
Yeah.
We have some similarities, the way we roll our R's and the way we pronounce words. And I still have that a little bit. I think it's got to do with how your mouth is shaped when you're a child. And people often say to me, "Where are you from?" And I say, "I'm from Kerry." And they say, "Go on, where are you really from?" And then I have to say, well, my parents were Belgian, and my mum is still alive. My dad died a couple of years ago, and I stopped trying to fit in, I suppose, and I just gave in to my natural way of speaking.
Yeah, and but again, it's that mixture of the two. And I talked about this a couple of weeks ago with somebody on the podcast about how two accents together, and they can be quite different accents, I suppose, like even if they're both Irish, but if it was Donegal and Kerry, for instance, they're quite different. But when you put them together, it kind of, it becomes very distinctive to the person. I think that's really nice that a person has their own kind of distinctive accent.
That's a very, observant, very observant of you. I have a friend who lives in Glasgow. We went to school together, and he almost speaks like with a Donegal accent. So it's the Scottish mixed with the Kerry has made him speak like that. So yeah, you're right. It funny things happen.
Funny things happen with it.
Like that.
Mieke, we always start at the beginning and ask if you could give us a short history of your upbringing, please.
Okay, a short history. So I was born in Antwerp, and I was only in Belgium for about 6 months of my life, and then my parents moved to this little farm in the Schelde, which is partly, shown in the film Hungry Hill. And I lived there until I was 6 years old. My father was a shepherd. He used to get up in the morning with his flock. He'd take them out grazing until the evening and come home when it was dinner time. And my mother was a theater costume designer, and she did that until I was 2. And my uncle, he was 20 years younger than my mum. He grew up with us. She raised him because she was his legal guardian, and he unfortunately lost his parents when he was very young. They did, and she raised him. So he was like my brother. He's 9 years older than me. And in 1981, my parents moved to Beara. Having gone around Europe looking for an alternative and not really finding anywhere that we liked, we settled in Ireland, and it allowed my father to buy a hill farm. And my mother had at that point already given up work because she had her hands full. And so I had a very idyllic upbringing in a way. I mean, times were tough in the 80s. I mean, we bought a farmhouse on the side of a mountain. It had no bathroom. It just about had electricity. And it was really difficult to get to. You had to open 4 gates before you got there, cross a bridge. When the river flooded, I wasn't able to sometimes to go to school. It was great.
Yeah.
My parents just said, don't bother. But my education didn't suffer. It was fine. And I could continue talking about this
Yeah.
for another hour.
No.
There's another chapter to it.
Yeah.
So
I think with it, and we will talk about the film because it does dip back into that and where you ended up. And I just wanted to kind of ask about, you know, was there a huge difference for you when you were young? Now, I don't remember a lot from when I was 6 years of age, and I don't know how much you remember from when you were 6, but was there a big difference culturally moving from where you were to where where you, I suppose, are now, or Beara?
Yeah, I remember a lot.
Okay.
I remember the school that I went to in Holland, which was pristine, and the teachers were pristine as well. They were like came out of a fashion magazine. And we arrived in Ireland in the depths of winter, and I went to school straight away. And we were lucky. There were 4 English girls living to the left of us with their parents, and 2 to the other side with their mother of us. I mean, we were in a valley in the middle of nowhere, but there were six girls all around my age. So we were together in the journey going to school and in the bus. And then when I got to school, I was kind of treated like something very special because I had bright white hair, and nobody back then was blonde. It was very funny. Nowadays it's completely different. You see lots of different colors, but back then you didn't. So, oh God, I was really like treated like something special. And it took me about a month before I spoke English.
Okay.
And I had an English accent when I was playing with the English girls, and I had a pure Kerry accent when I was in school.
So funny that it's funny how that swots around. You heard the accents are just very interesting to me, anyways. But my mom is from Cork, but she hasn't lived in Cork for a long time. But if she talks to her aunt from Cork, all of a sudden, you can hear my mom on the phone, the most Cork accent you can imagine, and it just like that. It turns just like that, and
yeah,
it's I don't know if it's to try and adapt or to kind of form a closer bond to the person as you're talking to them on the phone, even if they're already, your aunt or whatever. But I find it interesting how we do that with our voice when we need to. If I'm shouting in the gym, I become a dub quite quickly, and then when I'm when I'm outside, I'm not. So, Mieke, I wanted to ask another question we always ask people and get varied responses on it. When did you first become aware of mental health?
Yeah, I've thought about this. I suppose I was aware of mental health probably. I mean, there's no definitive stage where I suddenly
Yep.
became aware of it. But I've been brought up in a way that I would consider myself in tune with my emotions, and my family are, and I was very open always. I remember, this probably sounds ridiculous, but I remember one day I watched TV all day long, and I don't know what I was watching because we only had 2 channels, I think, at the time. And I went to bed that night, and my mum came up and she said, "Why are you crying?" I was crying, and I said, "I spent the whole day watching TV. I wasted my whole day." And she said, "Oh my God, don't be so melodramatic."
Yeah.
But I just realized at that point, you only get one chance at this life, and you have to use your time
Mm,
properly. And if you don't take responsibility, you end up feeling bad.
mm.
And I've always made a conscious effort. When I got home from school, I would go for a walk, or I'd take the dog, or I remember going up the hill one time, probably as a teenager, and just rolling around in the heather, bawling my eyes out because something was bothering me.
Yeah.
And I'm very grateful that I had that outlet. Um, and then obviously, as you grow up, things happen. And I remember being in Riversdale, which was a local disco, which was a fantastic place. And it's derelict now. Everybody used to go there, and um, one of somebody in my class, his sister, um, she committed suicide, and I actually don't remember when it happened exactly, but I just remember all of us huddling around him on the dance floor and hugging each other to REM. Um, Everybody Hurts. And I suppose that was a huge, huge moment where I realized what depression can do to you, and the hurt it causes to the people that are left behind as well.
Yeah. It's a
So
it's interesting though that you always seem to have the emotions were quite close to the surface all the time, but you were, like you said, you actually used the word there, you were conscious of it. I think
mhm.
that's interesting because I think the amount of times we've got the answer, and I'd be firmly in this camp of having terrible feelings when I was in school, but not putting a name on it, and maybe avoiding it because it's easier to avoid it and just pretend it's not there and go away soon. But everything, and it definitely happened to me, that everything just builds up and builds up if you don't let it out. And I like the idea that you were, even when you were young and watching TV all day and getting upset about it, you were, it was on the surface. Like you had a kind of a way to get rid of it. I think that's very, very special. I don't think a lot of people have that, you know?
Well, and I painted. I mean, yeah, I haven't actually really sat down and thought about it, but
Hmm.
I I went through a lot of turmoil when I was 27. I had four children under the age of four, and my marriage broke down.
Hmm.
And if it hadn't been for my parents, I probably would have cracked up,
Yeah.
But I two things that I did. I painted and painted and painted. I did a few very good paintings, and I did a hell of a lot of really terrible ones.
Okay.
But I got so much out of my system,
Yeah.
and I learned to ride horses during
Oh,
that time. And those two things saved me,
wow.
um, and got me through it. So
Art is a particularly, I don't know, a particularly powerful thing. And I think I was chatting to an art therapist yesterday who's been on the show before, but we were recording for episode 200 down the line. And we were discussing the idea, is there such a thing as a bad painting? Because it's what you're putting into it. And at the time, that's what you needed rather than what you were trying to create, if you know what I mean. And I know people might look at it, the art critic might look at it and say it's terrible, but compared to what, it's not like you were trying to compete with Van Gogh or something.
yeah, I mean, I suppose for me, I I was kind of teaching myself as I went
Mm,
along, and at the same time, it was like therapy.
yeah.
But I suppose at one point when I did get through it, some of the work became much, much better. And I felt it. I felt that I was achieving something,
Mm.
whereas some of the other paintings were, I mean, they were scary.
That's great.
In fact, one that I did was, you're right, one of them was really good, but it was awful at the
Yeah.
same time.
Okay.
And I painted over it, and my mother said, "Why did you do that?
Mm.
That thing was incredible, But yeah. So, but I did paint a heck of a lot of really bad ones. I promise you.
That's okay. I think that's okay. As long as it was something that was helping you, and that obviously was. How important was it for you to like be a farmer and maybe carry on traditions and for your kids to become farmers as well. Was that something that was on your mind, or was it just something that happened naturally? That's what you were always going to do.
I suppose it's just one of those facts of life. I mean, I inherited the farm in a way from my father, and so it was logical that I would. So I have my own place, but there's a second farm.
Mhm.
So I was entrusted to look after the land, and so I feel I have a sense of responsibility. And I never really questioned whether I wanted to or I didn't want to. I had to.
Yeah.
That was it. It's also my livelihood,
Hmm.
so it I have to make a living, and being an artist, as most people know, is not very reliable as regards making a living. So you may be lucky one year and you may be very unlucky the next. So with the farm gives me a bit of stability, and in return I get so much. I mean, I have a wonderful lifestyle. I have
Mm.
fresh air. I have a river to swim in. I have relationship with wildlife, with the animals, with the plants. It's really great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think looking at it from an outsider who hasn't been on that kind of landscape or even farm in general, it looks like such a difficult one compared to what I look out the window at. I look out the window at the farm and it's literally just a flat field with cows. But in what I saw in Hungry Hill, it's so, like there's a moment where something's happening up on the mountain, and all I think of is you have to go up a mountain. It's to me it sounds kind of, I don't know, like how hard is it on that terrain?
It's extremely hard.
Mm,
Uh, Not only getting up there to do a job, but getting somebody up there to do a job. It's practically impossible. It
mm,
took it took me almost 7 years to convince somebody to fence that mountain for me. And then obviously it was very challenging once that person got up there to do the job. But um, it's a whole other world up there,
yeah,
and there's something very rewarding about having a purpose when you're going up that mountain, rather than just, oh, I'm gonna buy some nice lycra in a shop in Killarney, and I'm gonna look the part and I'm gonna climb this mountain now, which is great. I
mm.
mean, okay, everyone should have a hobby, but I actually have to go up there whether I like it or not. So, and yeah, it feels good. It feels good to have that purpose.
Cool. Yeah, and when we talk, because when if someone hears like farmer and then filmmaker, it for some reason in your head you kind of think it doesn't match. Now, I've been very lucky to have seen Hungry Hill. I mentioned this a couple of times on the podcast that I was invited down to Killarney to the opening night, and this was the opening film of the festival. When and like, where did the idea come from? When did that begin?
I have to think now. So I suppose I feel compelled to make work no matter what.
Mm,
I have to. Um, and I have to work within my limitations, and that's where I live. And the way I work involves no, the people that I usually am interested in are people that I've known for a long time.
yeah,
So a lot of every time I make a film, there's a relationship there or a connection, and I feel strongly about usually the stories those people have that they can share. Um, and this film was a very natural. It just came about very naturally. So part of yeah, part of the reason is also my father, because he
mhm,
was a shepherd, and my father has been gone now for 4 years, and I felt that if I was to explain the story of the farm and the way that I have contact with the farming community in Beara and the relationship that I've built with Connie and John, that my father somehow had to come into the story, because if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be there doing what I'm doing. And in order to do that, I had to explain how we came to Ireland, and that's why I ended up going back and looking for the archive footage. And also, in general, the theme of shepherding, it's a very ancient tradition. You can't really find anything quite as ancient as that. And that's why I had to go back to the archive, and I had to start at the beginning for us. And I learned a lot by doing that, because I couldn't even find archive of shepherds. It's practically impossible to find. So yeah, so every film kind of takes on its own. It develops a personality of its own, I think.
Yeah.
That's how Michael and I work.
The fact that someone asked me this about, I was telling them about the film after I saw it, and Michael Holly was your co-director on it. How does that relationship work? Because I think a lot of people won't know. They have the idea that if one person directs it, it's like they're the one, they're the voice. But how do you work with Michael to co-direct?
Well, so Michael isn't a farmer. He's from Kerry originally. He is actually a lecturer in film, documentary film at the University of Sussex. He's very academic, obviously. But Michael and I, we both share a love of a group of filmmakers known as the Sensory Ethnography Lab based in Harvard. And the way they work, they're anthropologists, and they use sensory ethnography, so it's very much about the senses as opposed to the usual formulaic documentary style, which follows the traditional feature film style. You have your arc and you have your ending, your happy ending, and the whole thing. But we don't work like that. So we co-directed, but we don't work in a conventional way. We filmed a lot, and probably the ratio was much higher than for conventional films. And we then, it came together in the edit, and I did a lot of the offline edit, and Michael helped me with critically looking at what I was doing and making sense of it. Because I'm very creative, but I'm not very logical sometimes. And he had to sort of make sense of what I was trying to say. And he went off and he filmed the calmer pieces in the film where the mountain gets the attention, and that mountain begins to play a role. So maybe I'm explaining this in a very roundabout way.
No,
we work together really well. I can't emphasize that enough. It's a really brilliant collaboration.
What was amazing for me, there was two things quite early on in the film where I'm a bit of a nerd like this, but in a good way. Where there was one particular shot where, and you mentioned Michael taking those kind of long shots on the mountains, and there was a bit where the camera wobbled because of the wind. Now, a lot of the time that won't happen because the filmmaker will think, well, I can't have that. I need this steady shot. And then in the car where you were with John, I think, you had the camera facing John and then coming back to the kind of windshield and stuff. And again, it wasn't like there was a wobble in the camera, which is how we look at the world. We don't stand still like this and just stare into space. We move our heads all the time. That to me is something that draws me into a film and makes it very immersive. I love the fact that, like, we will talk about the characters because it's really important, but I think the way it was shot, I think was amazing, because it was this is how I look at things, look at the world. I don't look at the world like holding the camera steady. So I love that idea.
Well, that's just really, really great for us to hear, because that's what we were hoping to achieve. And not everybody feels like that, but that was our aim. So thank you for for seeing it.
Mm.
And yeah, the imperfections were allowed. And Connie moved so fast that I don't have a proper cinema lens. So by the time I got the focus, he was usually gone, and I'm always complaining about that. But Michael doesn't care. He says, no, it's fine. We're putting it in. And I needed him to keep reassuring me.
Mm.
So
It's that, but that's the way you put it, is the way that, you can do certain things with big Hollywood blockbusters and you think everything has to be perfect, but look, life's not perfect, and the imperfections, like you said, is the whole thing around it. I love the characters, because it reminded me, there's something about living where I live, and I'm sure it's the same as you, that community of people waving when you pass them and saying hello to you when you pass them. And the closer you get to a town or a city, that kind of disappears a little bit for whatever reason. But you the conversations between people, there's the bit in the back of the where all the sheep are, and they're trying to sell the sheep, and it goes back and forth between the guy trying to buy the sheep, who wants to buy 3 sheep, but the other man wants to get rid of the 4 sheep, and it goes on for ages. But it's comedy, like, it's just, people were laughing in the cinema along with it. And that to me is like, you don't see that much anymore, that kind of community, those kind of things. And it's very kind of heartwarming. And the way that you interact as well with people, it's clearly a community around you. And do you want to speak on that a bit? Is that, how important is that to you?
yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah.
I get a lot from that. The scene you're talking about is the sheep dealer Pat Keefe. He's in Kenmare at the ram sale,
Yeah.
and that's already happened now. So yeah, it happens in October.
Oh.
And I filmed it. Yeah, I was in Kenmare. I knew they were going to be there, and I was just about to go home when I spotted him, because I'd been filming and I got a few things, but I wasn't feeling it really.
Hmm.
And then I was just about to go and I saw him and I thought, oh, I'm gonna hang around the back of the truck for a bit. And I thought the worst he can do is tell me to go away. But he didn't. He kind of he acknowledged me, but he
Hmm.
ignored me. And then he started to really, I think, perform in a
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
It was quite magical. And I just stuck with it, and he was great. And it's true. He knows himself that that's not going to be around much longer.
Hmm.
So I'm really glad that I caught it. And yeah, I mean, we know each other. I don't know him well, but most people around Kenmare know that I'm an artist and that I have sheep. So, and they just, it's all grand, it's whatever.
Whatever she's up to, she's
Sell me a ram, he's happy.
yeah. And
Yeah.
this like, John as a character in himself, and
I think you mean Connie.
it's Connie, my
Yeah,
bad.
yeah,
Connie, as a character himself, is such a, he's so good on screen, with that. And maybe, we all kind of perform a little when a camera's on. And I understand that. But when a camera's on you for a certain amount of time, I think that starts to wear off a little bit, because it becomes part of the conversation. And just your conversation with Connie, they're sometimes fleeting. Sometimes he's moving quite quickly. He's getting on with his day. But then when you're sitting in the kitchen talking to him about maybe the pressures of farming and the financial, problems that can come about, like you mentioned earlier on, about one year you're having a great year and the next it's something else, and maybe the EU is getting involved with farming and stuff. How important was Connie to the film, and also, like, was he first in your mind as someone who you could have front and center of the film?
yes, Connie was important.
Mm.
He's quite special. Himself and John, it's where they live, how they live, and how Connie talks and thinks about farming. I haven't met anybody quite like him. So the magic was there,
Yeah.
and he agreed, but his sheep always come first.
Yeah.
So if he was busy with something and I couldn't go along, then I just had to wait.
Yeah.
But he let me come along for quite a lot of things, and I'm glad he did.
Yeah.
But it was tough keeping up with him because he's extremely fit, and my
Yeah.
camera is quite big, and I did that on my own. So doing sound and camera all at once, it has its challenges. But yeah, without Connie, it wouldn't have been the same, to be
Yeah.
honest.
I think there's those characters in the film, and there's Connie, and then the archival footage where we go back. And who is the man in the archival footage who does most of the talking?
His surname was Van de Zande,
Okay.
and he was a ranger in the nature reserve there. He had to look after, keep an eye on things. It was like, I suppose, like an SAC. It had to be monitored, and
Mhm.
he would also take people out that on trips and things, to show them around and to look at the wildlife. So my parents knew him.
Oh, right.
Yeah, but the archive that's in the film, we would already have been gone at that point when
Right.
that was recorded. And I got that through the Netherlands Institute for Sound and Vision,
Mm.
and it was television footage. So yeah, he's special too. It's
Mhm.
true. He really is a strong character that runs through the film every
It's
time.
his that kind of the way you mix the two together is obviously very important. You said at the premiere at the Kerry Film Festival that you didn't want us to think too much about it or to read too much into it, which which I guess it kind of had the opposite effect. It's like saying, "Don't think of an elephant," and you think of an elephant. Because the thing is, because you know there are messages within the film, and you talk about the man in the archival footage talks about the encroaching chemicals on the
Yeah.
in the water.
Yeah.
And you talk to Connie about the EU and the money and situation. Um, what was the? Why did you feel, or why do you think we shouldn't, think too much about it?
Well, so first of all, I want to say that the archive, the way we put it in the film, it's always a challenge when you're mixing types of footage and different temporalities, different times. So I had to take a lot of risk in a way. I had to just experiment with it and see what would happen. And I think as the film draws towards the end, the overlap with the audio from the archive and the footage from Beara, they begin to overlap more and more, and the meaning becomes a bit more mixed in a way. They overlap there, so something very interesting begins to happen, and that's part of how we wanted to tell the story. And yeah, so I said, don't read too much into it. I suppose what I was trying to say was, don't try to analyze or reason, just absorb it,
Yeah,
and don't try to kind of consciously decide what's going on. It just let the meaning evolve itself. Because I've had once or twice at various screenings, people have come up to me and said, I don't know where this was going. I didn't know what to think. And we were, we kind of, and they felt like they'd somehow let us down, or
mm,
that they had done something wrong. And both Michael and I both said, no, that's exactly what we wanted you to experience. That, um, that's exactly what this film is supposed to do. You're supposed to not know it's we haven't explicitly laid out a
mm,
meaning, which so many films do. Especially documentary with the music and everything, they make you feel sad. They make you feel,
yeah.
um, the tiger
I
is
can't
going to
help you with
kill.
that on Mac.
Sorry,
Didn't know who
tiger.
that was.
The tiger is going to kill the gazelle. You know what's
Yeah,
going to happen. It's not a happy happy occurrence. But this film is different. So I don't know if I've explained it
No,
properly.
you have, and that is a good way of looking at it. That it doesn't have to like everything. It seems these days has to be explained to the nth degree kind of a thing. Where I don't think it necessarily has, because it should challenge you.
Yeah,
Whatever I
exactly.
took away from the film, I don't think I needed to understand every little bit of it, but I definitely I always want to be, especially in documentaries, want to be swept up by what's happening and that real life stuff. The bits where I didn't expect, I didn't expect you to appear on the camera grabbing hold of a ram, but it happened, and that's good. And like it's your son in it, right?
Yeah, Adam
Adam.
is,
So he's a big
yeah,
character in it too, isn't he?
yeah. He that happened again almost accidentally in a
Mm,
way. We just because I thought I was farming, I was out there doing things, and I had my camera with me, so I just thought I'm here, I might as well film it, and it ended up becoming a big part of the film. But also we wanted to show, rather than being negative and, oh, the tradition is dying and there are bachelor farmers, that are, the tradition is going to die out
yeah.
and nobody's following in their footsteps, but that's not true. There are young farmers out there that are going to take over. They're not as many probably as previously, and my son happens to be one of them.
Um,
So I felt it was important to be a bit, you know life goes on, we have
yeah.
to keep going.
He's great in it. He seems to be someone who just takes control of a situation. Even like I didn't know how chaotic sheep farming could be. Trying to try to pen them in. There's one scene in it where Adam and someone else is trying to get two sheep who are kind of just jumping around the place doing their thing. And there's a man, an older man, standing with a couple of crutches, and
Yes.
I'm not going to say the word because my dad would kill me. He uses the C word, and that got the biggest laugh in it because it's so unexpected that but it is a chaotic, um, you know,
Yeah,
vocation. It's when you are trying to grab them to give them their shots or whatever. I'm not up with the lingo. I apologize for that.
it's
But
okay. I know
yeah,
what you
yeah, exactly. So when
mean.
you do have to, and you've got to look after their hooves and all this kind of stuff, and they don't want you to be at them. And it's just to me, it's
No, a sheep always wants to get away from you as far and as fast as possible.
but those moments of like comedic relief as such when somebody's watching it. Obviously, not when you're in the middle of it. I do love that as well because
We
there.
do have laughs though as well, to be honest. Like sometimes the lads will say things and you just, you're standing there covered in you know what, and
Yeah.
Adam sometimes brings his speaker and he puts on techno while we're looking after the sheep, which is pretty funny.
Yeah. Well, you're there's a moment up the mountain towards the end where you're on the throttle on the buggy
Yes,
and
I'm reluctantly on the throttle.
reluctant. Yeah, that is true. And the lads get absolutely destroyed in filth, basically. But those things are so important in a. I think those things. Look, you can't have humor in every documentary. I understand that. It depends on what the situation is or the subject matter is.
Subject, yeah, of
But I
course.
think it's brilliant in your one and the way it's uh, kind of speckled in here and there. And there was proper laughs in the cinema when I was watching it.
Well, I have to admit, I've seen it 5 times in the
Okay.
cinema, and I actually snuck out of that screening,
Yeah.
but I stayed, and I was in anticipation in the corridor afterwards. But yeah, no, that the comedic side of it is,
Mm,
it's wonderful that
yeah.
that kind of happened also a little bit by accident, and that it's being well received. I That makes me very happy.
Yeah, of course.
Because yeah, it's my sense of humor, but it also comes about because I know these people so well.
Yeah.
I don't know if you recollect the scene where my friend Michael McGrath takes out a tool to hit the dashboard of the truck, and it's because we know each other for 20 years.
Yeah.
He's just doesn't even see the camera, he's
No.
just himself. So
And then he combs his hair.
Yeah, which but that people think, okay, the funny bit's over, and
Yeah.
then they get another giggle. Yeah,
Just
and yeah, do you know what he said to me after the screening in Kenmare? He said, "Well, you're after making a holy show of me."
yeah, there you go.
That's what he said.
But it's that's what's so charming about, those scenes and those characters, like, and the idea that it would be a shame to kind of lose those communities and lose those characters and situations and friendships as well, because there's a lot of friendship involved in it too. And I think you can see that in the film a lot. I think that's what's very heartwarming about it. And look, whatever you want, whoever comes out of it and says, like, I didn't understand it, and that's fine. Look, if you want to try and understand every minute of it, that's, go for it. But it's more than just what the message is. It's the family and the community and everything, everyone chipping in for each other. That's that idea of helping others. I'm not saying it's dying out, but it seems to be more about helping people on Instagram and not in real life situations.
Yeah, but that's what farming
Mm,
is really. You need support, you need help, and to be honest, you can always do with more help.
mm,
And yeah, and it's true, there are a lot of layers to the film. Um, and sometimes like I said, I've seen it quite a few times, and actually almost every time I see something else.
yeah.
Obviously, I'm critical as well, but
Yeah.
uh, you know, but yeah, I'm glad we made it, and I hope it stands the test of time.
Oh, for sure. I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned you did the editing and you also produced it.
Yeah.
At what point do you let it go and put it out there? Because that's quite difficult for creative people, I think.
Well, so I spent a year trying to get funding
Yeah.
and working on the archive, being in touch with the people in the archives to know what I could use, and all of that. It was took a long time, and then spent a year filming and editing, and then almost when it was completely finished, we got involved with a film agency, and they're helping us to distribute it. But they said, look, it's great, but there's just one tiny thing that we'd like to mention, and that was we had text at the start instead of my voiceover, and so we thought it was done, and
Hmm.
we had to go back, and it created a little bit of hassle, but I think it was worth it,
Yeah.
because it meant that people could connect with me from the very
Yeah.
beginning, and otherwise they would have been like, who is this voice, who is this
Yeah.
person? Because I come I'm in it, but I'm not really in it.
Mm.
So is it's finished, but I've still seen a few tiny things that aren't 100%, and I'd love to go back, but I have to restrain myself.
Yeah. That must be so hard as well. About, because I wanted to ask you about how that does work, distributing a film, because it's been in film festivals already, but how does it get, like, from there maybe onto, a digital platform or onto TV or whatever? How does that kind of come about?
Well, I'm learning as well. I
Okay.
This is my first funded feature
Mhm.
film. I've made a couple of other films, but not to this level, because we had, everything was done properly for this film. Because I could pay people, which is what you want.
Mm.
So yeah, we're still just at the film festival stage. We
Yeah.
haven't gone on to the next stage, so I don't really know 100%. I don't think this film is ever going to be in the cinema. It's not um mainstream.
Yeah.
It's really something for art house. So the journey continues, and
Yeah.
we're still kind of I suppose we're more or less in the middle now
I
with.
I just I need my granddad to see it, because he loves that stuff. He loves it. He's from Cork himself, but the farming, the communities. He's 96 now, and I was telling him about it as soon as I got back. I was FaceTiming him and I was telling him about the film, and he was laughing because I was telling him some of the scenes,
That's great.
yeah, with Connie and stuff, and he, like, I'd love if he could see it, because I think I think he just loved the film. I just think it's just something that he, and the same goes for. I was telling my mum about it too, and she saying she loves the sound of it. And I think you're right. I think, unfortunately, cinemas don't have a lot of space for anything outside of blockbusters these days. It tends to be full of those, and then art house cinemas where you kind of had more luck, I suppose. But for it eventually to come on TV or something, I think it'd be wonderful.
Well, let's see. I mean,
Yeah.
who knows? But we are at Kenmare. There's a little theater in Kenmare, and they've asked to screen it in December.
Oh,
So I think there'll be a few kind of local screenings
yeah.
as well. So that which is nice.
Yeah, that's great because of the fact that it's in that area. I think it's always something nice about that. That the hometown or the home area can see it. Um, when do you think? Because this is something that has been on my mind. I haven't spoken to someone like a farmer or worked in the farming industry about the idea of loneliness and the idea of financial pressures on people. Is that a worry within the farming community? You mentioned about, bachelors, who are living on their own. Is there a worry about mental health within those communities?
I think it's everywhere.
Yeah,
Um, I think that you don't necessarily need to be isolated to it, as in you can be isolated in a city,
yeah.
but um I think, and yeah, I have to be careful what I say now. I think,
No, that's okay.
did you say, is there a worry about mental
Well,
health?
not that there's a worry about, that people are worried about it. I remember that they were talking about, a few years ago, there was the idea of, uh, they cut down from like 2 pint. You couldn't have 2 pints. You could only have
I
one
was,
pint. That you could have,
yeah, I was
that kind
afraid
of
to
thing.
say, yeah, I was
Yeah.
afraid to
No,
say
that's okay.
it's usually alcohol. There's so much is alcohol
Yeah.
related, and not always though.
No.
Um, and it's sad, and I was going to say it's kind of tolerated.
Yeah.
You'll see people parked at a certain pub, and everyone knows that
Yeah.
you have the few regulars, and um, it's bad, and people have drink problems, and what do you do?
I know.
It's an affliction, and as we're drawing back into the winter, and the daylight gets less and less, people are suffering more. So what
It's
can you do about it? I mean,
I mean, that's the thing about it. It's a great idea on a large scale to think we can fix these things and we can help everybody. And unfortunately, people fall through the cracks, and it's I don't know how we would fix it. I think that whole thing, because alcohol is one thing that people use it to reassure themselves or make themselves feel better in the short term, and then obviously feel. I remember when I was drinking too much that in the short term I felt great that night, but the next morning I woke up and I had like anxiety, and I had, I
yeah,
was down, and it being a depressant, and loneliness is certainly, you made a point there about it. It's everywhere. It's obviously not just in isolation. It's the idea of someone in an apartment that can't leave because they've got anxieties and stuff. It's all over, and I think I don't know if there's any answer to it, but I know that it's still out there. But I think what made me think about it, in a positive way, was the film and the way that people were supportive, and being kind, to each other, and that's definitely something that helps the whole situation.
yeah. And Connie and John are just great like that.
Mm.
There's somebody needs a lift into town, they'll stop, and they'll always help you out. They're always there for you. So people like that are really, yeah, really important.
Yeah, we need more. We need more. Probably
Yeah,
Connie and John.
yeah.
What's next in the pipeline?
So I have a few plans, but we have to wait and see.
Yeah,
I I have an idea for a film that I will be hopefully directing on my own. And then Michael and I are also in the process of making a proposal and going for another round with
Oh,
the Arts
really?
Council. But it's competitive, so we will see what happens. And I shot a teaser for that last weekend. So I'm not going to explain
No,
exactly what
that's
it's
okay.
about, but it's a bit of a departure because for me, while it's still a subject close to my heart,
Mhm.
it's with people that I don't know and that I will need to get to know.
Yeah.
And I met them last weekend, and I must say it was a very productive meeting. So I suppose, yeah, Hungry Hill was the start of a journey, and
Yeah.
my practice is still evolving, and I'm learning all the time. And I'm based in Dublin at the moment. I'm on a residency here, and I will be for the next 2 years. So that gives me kind of access to areas and places and people that I normally wouldn't have had access to. So we'll see.
Do
The
you-
Yeah, sorry.
no, I was just going to ask, do you thrive on work? Like, is that your thing?
I must say, going to film festivals is great, but I really like making work. Yeah, I
Yeah.
do. I hadn't picked up the camera for quite a while, and I got such a buzz from it.
Yeah.
It's uh, it's magic. Yeah.
I mean,
So yeah, we'll see what happens.
brilliant. We always ask this as well, and it doesn't sound like you're going to have much of an answer to this because I don't think you have much spare time. But what do you like to do in your spare time if you have any?
I yeah, I've started wild swimming, and I'm
Oh,
entering my second year now. So last year I swam all year round in the river, right through when there was snow and ice. And this year, while I'm based primarily in Dublin, I've been going to the South Wall and to the Half Moon Club and dipping there. But I do miss the river, I have to admit,
but
because it's
people,
so.
can I ask a question on behalf of the people? Why do you do that?
Well, I had a physical reason. I've had a bit of a bad back
Mm,
for a couple of years, and just the cold gave me relief.
yeah,
Also, it just clears your mind
yeah,
completely, resets everything. And I didn't think I have a friend who just, I thought I couldn't do it, but my friend was doing it, and he said, "Look, you can do it. You can do this." So I persevered and went right down to 2 degrees. And I have to admit it the health benefits do seem to be, it does seem to work.
yeah.
So
Like we've had so many people on doing it. I've done it up until October, and then I've decided that's all right till March. But we've had people talk about it in regards to physical, but also mental health. The idea, like, clear your
yes,
head is the way you put
yeah,
it. And I think there's also an element when I was doing in my part time way. There was also an element of achievement for me because I thought I can't handle this cold for 10 minutes or whatever it was. But when I did it, I got out and I was like, it was a boost in not just like, mental health or physical health, but a boost in something that you've done that morning or you've done that evening. And we don't always have that around. Sometimes we just go to work and come home, go to work and come home. But
yeah.
if we could get those, like, you shouldn't have to run a marathon to feel like that. You should be able to have a 10-minute dip in freezing cold lake and then get out and go, well, that was something I did for myself.
I think, yeah, it's on so many levels. It's
Mm,
really, really great, but it's also the contact with nature. I
yeah.
really feel that you're just immersed in it, and that really, really works. There's an energy there. You have to admit that.
Yeah.
It's like going to church. This is what I do for my spiritual
Yeah.
well-being. So it's I'm lucky that I can, yeah, and that I
Absolutely.
always find a place where I can do it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I should be doing it more because I live just outside the Lake County. I mean, it's in the title. So Mieke, you've been a fascinating and brilliant guest. So thank you so much for doing it.
Thanks, Derek. It's been really lovely.
Thank you. Listen, would you mind sticking around for a minute until I close this out? I want to take a quick photo of the screen and then we're out of here. All right.
I'm red.
You're all right. Don't worry.
Around
I
the back.
blue. Look, I just look blue all the time. But I want to also thank, as I always do, John for his technical wizardry. I thank my mum, my dad, granddad, as always, Jaron Calvin. We're on YouTube, so subscribe to that. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Please keep an eye out for Hungry Hill. We'll see what happens down the line, obviously, but please keep an eye out for it because it's absolutely brilliant. We're also on Spotify, Apple, Anchor, Google Podcasts, all the rest. Obviously, to the people who tuned in today, thank you very much for doing so. Mieke, once again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Right, we're off. See you next week. Bye.